Hey there, everybody. It's your pal Choppadong, and I'm going to run through a cash game player pool for MLB DFS. If you are the type of player that likes playing cash games, 50-50s, double ups, head to heads, and you struggle to build a lineup, let me show you a basic way to get off on the right foot. Not a guaranteed super strong lineup that's going to win 75-80% of the time or any of that, but it's going to put you on the right plays, and from there you can mix and match in terms of who you like to assemble into a lineup. Nobody's going to build the same lineup. They'll all be fairly close because we'll have a very, very tight pool of players to pick from, and we'll use the DFS Army Domination Station to do so. It takes all of about 5 minutes. So let's jump in right after I tell you, of course, that I am Choppadong. I'm senior content creator and editor over at dfsarmy.com. One-stop shopping, all things daily fantasy sports, from football to basketball to baseball to anything that you want to play. Our VIP program unlocks every tool, every coach, every optimized lineup, everything you could possibly want to become a better player. So I strongly encourage you, of course, check us out, dfsarmy.com. Use the coupon code DFSARMY and get 10% off of the VIP package. Every single month that you remain a member, your price never goes up, even if ours does. So tell your friends, jump on in, get into the Discord, get active, and let's start building some cash lineups. When I dive in, I love taking a peek at the optimized lineups in terms of what the projections are telling us. But when it comes to a cash game, we want to play safe and we don't mind being heavy on the chalk. These days, with so many projections and so many numbers matching up and lining up, the ownership projections become very, very important to a cash game build. They tend to point you in the right direction 9 times out of 10. It's kind of almost a consensus ranking. If everybody likes this particular player, there's a reason for it. He's either a cheap value or a very consistent, very safe play, or he's just a stud in a great matchup. Those are the types of plays that we want to take advantage of for a cash game. So, quickly speaking, we're just going to dive in, sort by projected ownership top to bottom, and start looking at who's chalky today. First thing we can look at is our pitchers. You're going to want to start there, and usually you're going to want to pay up, especially on a site like FanDuel. And we'll do DraftKings another time, but you're going to want to pay up because that generally leads to the high floor consistent pitcher, and that's your most consistent source of points in MLB, which is otherwise a very volatile sport, and get your lineup started in the right direction. So I'm looking at Matt Brash and Noah Syndergaard, and I know that sounds crazy, but they're the highest owned players on the slate. Matt Brash is cheap at 8,600. A lot of people will probably go that direction. Noah Syndergaard had a great start last time out, 10,200. Maybe you want to save what amounts to almost $2,000 in your salary cap. Today, it's okay. Typically, I'm going to tell you, you're going to find the high-priced guys with a big gap. So all I'm going to do is uncheck all of the players, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to check them back into who I want in my player pool. I don't care if it's Brash or Syndergaard today. I'm not locking a pitcher in. Whatever the projections, whatever the optimizer wants to do for me is fine. I come over to catcher. Catcher's a little weird because catcher and first base are going to be kind of merged together on FanDuel. You don't have to roster a catcher if you don't want to. So I'm looking for a chalky option. I don't really see one. Doesn't look like catcher is of major importance today in terms of a cash game build. I'm also looking for players that are at the top of the order, and I'm going to make sure that I include some cheaper guys as well in case my lineup optimizer wants to start paying up all over the place due to something like a positional scarcity. I always like to include at least one cheaper option most of the time, but I'm not going to include any catchers today at all over on FanDuel. Jared Walsh, 3,600 at what's 25% ownership. 25% ownership here, 20% for Matt Olson. If you wanted to include an Alonso, you probably could. If you wanted to include Christian Walker, I don't know. He's cheap. We may be able to find value elsewhere, notably the outfield and a lot of times middle infield. So I'm going to hold off on that for right now. But I'm going to look for drop-offs in these ownerships. 20 to 17 is a pretty good drop-off. If you only wanted to include Walsh and Olson, that's fine. If you like Alonso's numbers going up against Arizona and you want to include him, I guess that's okay. But there's a big drop back down under 15%. These guys are just not going to be very chalky tonight. Doesn't mean that they're not great options. Doesn't mean they're not consistent players. It just means most of the world today is not on them. If you include somebody else off of this list, you do so at your own risk. This is how I build my cash lineups when I'm not diving super, super deep into research and numbers. I look over at second base, another huge drop off from 25% down to 17%. I really don't need anyone other than Kittle Marte today. I don't need Robinson Cano in the 7 hole. I don't need Eduardo Escobar in the 5 hole. I don't need Taylor Wade in the 8 hole, if that's where he lands. Now, if he comes up to the 1 or the 2, he's going to become an option, and his ownership numbers should project upwards to pick up on that before lock. So we've got a little bit of time. Looking at Trey Turner, typically a great option for a cash game, and he's still a fine option today. He's just going to be a little bit lower owned option, which we don't really care to take those pivots in our cash games. If you're sold on a Trey Turner or an Ozzie Albies, be my guest. You can certainly do so. See, that number just adjusted a smidge. That's why you saw it hitch. But nothing really jumped up here compared to the 25-26% that Kittle Marte is, so I'm going to leave him alone. Come over to Rendon, 34%. I'm just going to lock him in. Now, I'm getting to the point with these $3,000, $3,200, $3,500 guys. I may want to find a cheaper guy. Again, I am guessing we're going to find that in the outfield. But these are just too big of price breaks. I don't need to consider anybody else right now. Shortstop, 21, 16, 13. Pretty big price ownership drop or ownership break here. Lindor looks like the play. If Suarez is $1,000 cheaper, we may include him. And again, if Taylor Wade jumps, we may include him. If he jumps up in the order and up in the ownership rankings, we may include him. But for now, we're just going to run this as is. It looks like Mike Trout's going to be very important tonight. Shohei Ohtani, very important tonight. Varsho, there's your value in the outfield, leading off at $2,500, along with Kittle Marte in the outfield, which we will be using him at second base. Nemo's a great player too. You're at 22%. There are drop-offs here, but over 20% is usually a number that I look for. Joe Adell doesn't look like he's projecting to play. If he does, I guess if you really need it. But you've got Varsho and Marte, and you're probably taking the cheaper pitcher in Brash to do so. So let's just call this a really, really tight player pool today. And let's see what we get out of it. We'll come back up here and we'll set optimal mode, so it's using the projections very, very heavily. It's not mixing players. One unique player will make 3 lineups, and that's pretty much it. We'll see if not enough salary to fit. So we're going to have to find, I guess, some of those cheaper players. That's generally what that's going to mean. So if I come down here and I include Rosario in the 5 hole at 2,200 for Atlanta, maybe I need to find another guy or two at these positions. Maybe I do need to include a Taylor Wade. Cronenworth in the 2 hole at 2,900 isn't a terrible option either. See, I will forego the ownerships a little bit when it comes to trying to find those value plays. And if I find one at most of the positions, I think we'll be okay. Eduardo Escobar, 2,200 in Velasquez, not in the 9 hole. Don't need that. You want those opportunities to score fantasy points. You're definitely going to want those. Maybe a Robbie Cano in the 7. I don't. It feels dirty. Muncie's fairly cheap. We can go ahead probably and include Muncie now. Going to be a more consistent option than Robinson Cano most of the time. We've got a cheaper option here at 3,100. We don't need a catcher. We've got a cheaper option at pitcher. Let's see if that actually allows it to work. There, looks like it worked. There's our 3 lineups. Your cash core, so to speak, is the guys that are going to end up in every lineup no matter what you do. And it looks like Brash is going to be the cash pitcher tonight in terms of what's going to get you a strong lineup built. Again, if you wanted to go Noah Syndergaard, I'm not going to fault you. You're going to struggle to find some bats. Rendon, Trout, Rosario, Ohtani, Jared Walsh in 2 of the 3 lineups. It's getting a little Angels heavy, but on a 5-game slate, stacking's probably okay. And we're going to mix and match a little bit. It loved using Varsho in the outfield. Of course, we knew that at a cheap value, leading off at 2,500. That's a key cash game type of play. Kittle Marte's underpriced for what he can do. I'm surprised he only landed in 2 of 3 lineups. He should probably be in all 3. But there, generally speaking, is your cash lineup. If you want, you come down here now and you see Brash, Walsh, Marte, Rendon, Suarez. If you don't want a Suarez, you can swap him out. You can use our little change player button, and you can plug in who you want when you've got the options. There's a Cronenworth if you want. It's going to free up some salary, of course, if you decide to do something like that. Suarez in the 4 hole is probably a pretty solid pick. Trout, Ohtani in the lineups with Rosario. This is just going to be a fairly solid cash lineup tonight. I made 3 lineups just to show you some alternatives. There's Jared Walsh, Muncie, Rendon, Cronenworth, Trout, Rosario. That's going to vary by a couple of players. If I come down here a little bit more, this one's going to vary by a couple more. There's Olsen in the first base spot. But you're generally going to be similar. If you wanted to just run a test, you could take all three of these lineups and put them in $1 50-50 and see which one typically runs out well over time. It should be this top lineup. Most of the time, this should be the lineup that you're using. And if you're looking at the ownership, it's fairly chalky. You've got a Suarez and a Rosario that are a little bit lower owned, but we're not using any low owned players. We can get down here to a Cronenworth at 9%, but again, we're not looking for leverage in a cash game. We're just looking for a solid build, and we can use the ownership projections in today's environment to do so. And this is how you can use the optimizer, take your brain out of it, and put together what's going to be a very competitive lineup most nights. We've run this back a couple of times ourselves in the DFS Army community. It is showing positive results for guys that like cash games, guys that are trying to reset the system, and then they can add techniques and they can add fundamentals from here. This, again, is a baseline system that's going to take your brain and your decision making out of it, because obviously if you have been losing long term, you need to change some fundamentals in the way that you approach the game, and this will help you do that. You can get to this level here first and then continue to add from there. And of course, you use our DFS Army coaches to do so. So once again, I encourage you to drop in, dfsarmy.com, come say hi in our Discord channels, talk to our coaches, get your game in order, and start winning more money. Peace out, homies. We'll talk to you real soon.